Compelled by great compassion, you taught the sacred Dharma to dispel all wrong views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Do not commit any unwholesome actions. Engage in perfect wholesome actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Om Sachi Bhagi Jukshing Meto Dram Ri Rapling Chi Ni De Kin Pa Sangye Ching Mikte Po Ye Ru Kyun Nam Dak Shing La Chu Bar Shu. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Yidam Kuru Ratna Mandala Kamnuyatayami.
We can skip the four immeasurable thoughts.
Okay.
I'll take over from here. So, yeah. So, yeah, welcome everyone. Let's do a just short motivation first, and then we can do the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. And then maybe maybe we can just introduce ourselves to each other since we're some new people here. So yeah, especially for those of you it's your first time joining, then yeah, usually we start every session with a little this first verse that Bay led us reciting was a homage to Shakyamuni Buddha, in light of his compassion and wisdom, and then his teaching the Dharma in order to benefit sentient beings. It's a verse of homage that His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It's composed by Nagarjuna, and a verse that His Holiness the Dalai Lama usually recites before any public talk or teaching. And then then there was a verse from Sutra, which is a sutra in which the Buddha kind of summarized the essence of his own teachings to abandon non-virtuous actions. I'll show you. This first, do not commit any unwholesome actions. So to abandon any unwholesome, any negative actions, any harmful actions, and then perfect, all positive actions, engage in perfect wholesome actions. And then that the way to do this is to subdue one's own mind through meditation and contemplation and different, practices to transform or subdue or transform one's own mind, you can think. And then he concludes, this is the teaching of the Buddha. So that's by Shakyamuni Buddha in the Dhammapada. In one sutra, he summarizes his own teaching. And then at the beginning, it's a traditional to offer a mandala, which is what we did in this verse, first in Tibetan, and then the English translation of that Tibetan. So this is where basically you just visualize offering everything in the world, especially everything that you find pleasing. And then we do this hand mudra together, which I won't explain now, but it represents, because in traditional Buddhist cosmology, it's considered that our world system has a mountain at the middle. So the two ring fingers here touching represent the mountain in the middle. And then it's surrounded by four main continents. And so these four kind of pairs of fingers around that represent the four continents. And then you offer that. And it's basically the reason for offering is to thinking that, with the thought that I'm receiving, in order to receive something very valuable, to receive a Dharma teaching, then, I offer everything that I value. So you imagine offering your body, all your possessions, your body, and then your roots of merit. And imagine offering everything, and then everything you don't possess as well, everything pleasant in the world. Then imagine offering in order, and then requesting to receive teachings, to receive Dharma instruction is the sentiment there. And then, yeah, sometimes we'll recite the four immeasurable thoughts at the beginning. Today we'll skip over it. And then usually it's traditional before a Buddhist teaching to go for refuge to the Buddha Dharma Sangha. So I mean, of course, this course, we're not assuming any of you are Buddhist, right? But but it's but as because it's an introduction to Buddhist teachings, then part of that is an introduction to just typical Buddhist practices. It's not not indicating that you should become Buddhist or go for refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha. It's just part of a kind of traditional Buddhist teaching. So before that, though, it's probably the most important thing we'll do before any session is generate a positive motivation. So to do that, we usually sit quietly for a few minutes and meditate a bit to focus our mind, and then basically think about, why am I here? For what reason am I here participating in this? What do I hope to achieve for myself and then for others in the short term and also in the long term? So we think about that a little bit and try to generate a sort of positive reason, a positive aspiration or a motivation for like why we're participating. And by doing so, then it creates a powerful cause. Then whatever we do as far as participating in the session, it becomes a virtuous action, no? Because it's an action that we engage in with a very virtuous attitude, for a good reason. Yeah, so let's do that. First, just spend a few minutes generating a positive motivation. So sit comfortably in whatever posture is comfortable for meditation. And take a few deep breaths and just scan through your body briefly by bringing your attention, first to the crown of your head and then looking through the different parts of your body, your forehead, the back of the head, the back of the neck, especially around the eyes, the cheeks, the jaw. This is where, places that we often hold stress or tension, tightness. So as you inhale, imagine with each inhalation you're drawing in kind of healing, soothing, refreshing energy with the fresh air. And it flows into these parts of your body. And then as you exhale, imagine any tightness or tension or discomfort flows out on the breath. You can imagine it in the form of like black smoke, something, and it leaves the body, leaving the body clean and clear. So like that, scan down through your body, breathing in refreshing energy, exhaling any tightness or discomfort. So gradually bring your awareness down to your chest, the shoulders, especially the back of the neck, where the neck meets the shoulders. We often hold a lot of tension. And then the upper back, the chest, solar plexus, and then down the middle of the base of the chest, and then the abdomen, the mid back, lower back, and then the mid, lower abdomen. And like that, gradually down to the soles of your feet. Just let every part of your body kind of relax, be comfortable, soft, and at ease. Mm. And then once you scan down to the soles of your feet, then gradually turn your attention to your breath and just observe your breath or another object of placement meditation, like the mind, the conventional nature of the mind, or a visualized image, a Buddha or something else. So whatever, decide what object you'd like to focus your attention on for a couple minutes to generate some mental focus. So with the main part of one's mind, practice mindfulness, trying to maintain an unbroken continuity of awareness of the object of meditation. So if you're new to this, then it's easiest to watch your breath. Just breathe naturally and try to be continually aware of the sensations of breathing. So the main part of your mind, about 70%, 75% of your mental energy, you use just to direct towards the sensations of breathing and be aware of them. And then the other 25% of your attention, you use kind of like a spy in the corner of your mind, looking at observing your own meditation, observing yourself meditating. And so it's the job of that part of the mind, it's called introspection, to kind of be like a guard or a sentry, over observing the mind and being aware when you become distracted, right? When your attention drifts off to think about something else or pay attention to something else other than the object of meditation. And then it's also the job of that mind then to catch that, to notice that distraction as quickly as possible, and then to, decide, okay, I'm going to leave, following that distraction for now and bring your attention back to the object of meditation. So a big part of, especially when you're new at meditating, a big part of the meditation is not only observing the object of meditation, but continually letting go of this kind of energy the mind has to think about other things, right? Continually, or pay attention to other things. So we continually have to let go of those things and bring attention back to the object of meditation. So like that, try to practice just focusing your attention or practicing placement meditation for a couple minutes. Mhm. So then use that focused attention then to generate a positive motivation. So yeah, for those of you who already know about bodhicitta, it's excellent to generate a bodhicitta motivation, or generate a motivation in another way. I know many of you maybe already have quite some practice doing that. But for those of you who are new, generating a motivation, then as I mentioned before, the main thing is just to think about, why am I participating in this session? Why am I doing this? What are my short-term goals? And especially what are my long-term goals? And not only for myself, but also in relation to others. What benefit do I seek to bring about, right, for myself and for others, um, in the short term and also in the long term? And especially, it's excellent to to consider what are your highest aspirations for yourself, and then for countless other sentient beings, other people, animals, and so forth, who are similar to oneself and wishing to have more well being and happiness and wishing to be free from suffering and problems. So just reflect on that for a minute or two, and then try to clarify your motivation for participating in this session, and try to generate the most kind of positive and virtuous motivation that you can. Mm. Okay, so with that, then we can recite this verse of refuge and bodhicitta. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. On my two collections from explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay, so yeah, so again, welcome to you all. Um, yeah, so this is Discovering Buddhism, probably the 150th time it's been done at Ocean of Compassion Center. No. But this is one course that at the center they continually do, have continually done for many years now. I was just speaking to one of the old members of the center that she was saying she's done it 3 times already, um, with Venerable Pamo some years ago. So this is actually my second time leading this course for Ocean of Compassion. I did the first time during the pandemic, And I was living in India then. Did the whole thing together with Venerable Namjong. We split it, the whole thing via Zoom during the pandemic. Um, and yeah, this time the course is being hosted jointly by Ocean of Compassion Center here in Campbell and also Land of Medicine Buddha in SoCal. So the last module, which I just finished like 2 weeks ago, I was doing in person in Land of Medicine Buddha in SoCal. But this module I'm doing in person here. And then the next module, I think I go back there. Um, okay, so let's jump into this current module. This is quite a short module, relatively. There's only 4 sessions scheduled for this module. And this is the kind of description. I won't read the description there, but it's called, this is the 11th module of 14. So, I mean, it is important. The module immediately before this, module 10, which I led at Land of Medicine Buddha, was about bodhicitta, how to develop bodhicitta. So this module very much builds on that. So yeah, especially if some of you are just joining this module, like newly, and you haven't done that one, like, yeah, there might be some things go over your head a bit, or you feel a bit, kind of in deep water. I mean, I'll try to make it like, I'll try to explain things so, everything sort of fits, but yeah. But this module is very much building on that. So especially if you haven't studied like bodhicitta before and you want to like continue, it's good to do some extra reading like about bodhicitta. And I can help you with that if you like. But here's the main topics we're going to cover this module, or we're supposed to cover, are here. The 8 worldly concerns, equanimity, which we already went over quite a bit in the bodhicitta module, the shortcomings of anger and a desire or attachment, which, yeah, we won't talk about actually that much, but because we discuss it many other places. But the main thing is transforming problems into the path. So the main thing is like, transforming problems. When we have difficult experiences, how to view them in a way that becomes a support for our happiness and our spiritual practice rather than an obstacle and a hindrance. That's the main thing. I mean, as indicated by the title, transforming problems into the path. And then experiencing problems for others. So that's kind of one way of looking at problems in a different light, is that just instead of just thinking, oh, poor me, instead thinking, by my experiencing this problem and this hardship, this difficulty, may that become a cause for others to be free from that. Not only for me to be free from it, to learn how to overcome it, learn how to deal with it and overcome this difficulty, but also may become a cause for others to be free from that. And how to think about that more, we'll go through. And then taking happiness as a path to enlightenment. I have a feeling that should be actually taking suffering as a path to enlightenment. But whatever, it's like learning how to use difficulties and transform them into happiness and then make that into a path to enlightenment. So yeah, those are, anyway, some of the topics. And then there's some meditations that we'll do. Yeah, I'll go. I mainly wanted to point out the readings, actually. So the reading, there's a packet, like this packet, I'll show you. If you haven't signed up for the course online on the website, then if you do, you'll receive this, I believe. So this is like, there's a reading packet for each module. So for this one, there's just 3, it's quite short. It's only 29 pages total. There's these 3 kind of transcripts of short teachings. One by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and then 2 by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. The first 2 are really about the 8 verses of mind training, which is one short text. It just has 8 verses, and it's kind of a short mind training text that we'll go through. And then the third one is more just general about mind training. So I suggest you do those readings together. And then there's other readings from this book, The Wish-Fulfilling Golden Sun, by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and then The Ever-Flowing Nectar of Bodhicitta, also by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And then there's some readings from these other books. The main one I'm actually going to draw from is this, The Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, because it explains, actually for this course, I'm going to use the main mind training text. This is 7-point mind training. I thought it'd be nice just to go through that in a very user-friendly way. not a very technical way, but in a kind of, because then you get a real taste of like, what is mind training about? And this whole, I mean, I say mind training because this whole technique in Tibetan Buddhism for transforming problems into a path of spiritual practice is like the main subject of this whole genre of teachings and practices and texts called mind training texts, where basically you train your mind so that whatever you experience, whether it's fortunate, like something you feel is very fortunate, or something very unfortunate, like a problem, that you know how to transform that so that it supports and adds to and enhances your spiritual practice, which essentially means your practice of practicing, kindness, generating loving kindness, compassion, purifying non-virtuous karma, reducing afflictive emotions like anger and attachment, and then increasing positive emotions and generating merit and positive karma, and thereby coming closer to enlightenment, right, in order to benefit all sentient beings. So, yeah, so there's different, so the main kind of mind training text is the 7-point mind training, which I'll introduce in just a minute. So in the Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, the pages here that are suggested for reading, then he explains that text. And that whole text is in the appendix. I'll show you actually here. So this is my copy of Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. And for those of you maybe don't have a copy, there's some in the library here. I see 2 copies on the top left. It's the big blue book there. And like at Vajrapani also, there's a copy, I'm sure, in the library. And you can also get, e-book versions online and whatever. Okay, so this is in the appendix of Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand is the entire text. But also we'll send out by email the root text, this version of the root text, or you can download from Lama Yeshe's Wisdom Archive. That's the version I'm mainly going to use. I downloaded from there. So anyway, you can use Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand as a resource. And then there's a book, Transforming Problems into Happiness by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And then this other book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Yeah, Transforming the Mind. Anyway, there's these books there that are recommended readings for the course. So it's good if you can read those, but not, absolutely necessary. So, okay. So yeah, for this, to cover this topic, transforming problems into the path, we can say, then I'll mainly use this text, the 7-point mind training. And first I'll just introduce a bit more this text and this genre of teachings it's part of. So again, the genre of teachings is called mind training teachings. And it's something that is really, you don't find it wasn't fully developed in ancient India. Like in the Buddhist teachings, actually, there's another excellent resource, actually, I'll point out, which you can use, which I just discovered today. And it's an explanation of this text by Alexander Berzin, whom I just met. He was recently at Vajrapani Institute and Land of Medicine Buddha, together with Serkan Sentra Rinpoche. But on his website, Study Buddhism, then he has a nice explanation of this text called The Foundation and Deepest Bodhicitta. And actually, as I was reading that to prepare for class, then he mentions, which I learned newly, he mentions because when any Buddhist teaching should be rooted in the word of the Buddha, something Shakyamuni Buddha himself actually taught, right? So then when you hear about any aspect of Buddhist teaching, there's always a question, well, what's the basis for this in the actual words of Shakyamuni Buddha himself? So with the mind training text, I never heard this before, but he points out it's based on these 2 sutras. One, the Gandhabhyuha Sutra, which is part of the Avatamsaka Sutra, or the Flower Garland Sutra, which is famous in Chinese Buddhism. And actually, this sutra was translated by the Tibetans from Chinese. When they were translating the Buddhist sutras into Tibetan, it had already been lost in Sanskrit, but had been translated and preserved in Chinese. And that sutra, these days, we have so many resources available to us. I just copy pasted the name of the sutra into Google search, and sure enough, there's a huge organization translating a lot of sutras these days called the 84,000 Project, and they translated this sutra. So actually, we can email a copy of that out. So I downloaded it, and it's over 1,000 pages long. So I didn't start on it yet, but hopefully, as we go through this course, I'll read through it, and if I find some bits that are especially like clearly express some of the ideas we're going through, I'll bring it to your eyes. And then there's another sutra which I haven't searched for yet, which is called, I don't know if I can say it here, the Vajradvaja Parinamamana Sutra. Yeah. It's a long Sanskrit word, which I guess translates as the Positive Potential Sutra. Okay, that's much more easy. And I'm not sure if that's translated in English or not. I haven't searched yet. But anyway, there's this great website by Alexander Berzin. Maybe I'll also send the link later. But yeah. And there's this great page on his website, I mean, about explaining the text that we're going to go through, the 7-point mind training. So you can also use that as a resource if you like. I'm not sure you could see any of that because I didn't. Could you see that? No, you couldn't. I'm sorry. I always forget when you're in share in Zoom, and then you switch to a different. There it is. You switch to a different. Anyway, this is what I was pointing out. This is website. Anyway, I'll send it later. Okay. So yeah, so the genre of mind training. So it's based in these two sutras by the Buddha, the Gandhavayuya Sutra and this other sutra, the Positive Potential Sutra. But then you find the first, another earlier clear elaboration. Well, it's not really clear, and a somewhat elaboration of it, of the sentiments of this by Nagarjuna, which I'll point out quickly. I didn't open this document up. I have it handy because, where is it? Anyway, I'm not sure I have it handy actually. Let me check. As I recited, this is one His Holiness Dalai Lama has recommended we use for our personal practice. This verse by Nagarjuna. So I recite it every day, but in Tibetan. It's not going to help you all. So I'll try to find the English copy of it. Anyway, I don't see now. Yeah, anyway, it says, I'll show you later. It says, by Nagarjuna says, what is it? Oh yeah, may I consider Simpson Dani Simpson Tamzila Sadan Chudam. I can always, it's always like that. Prayers you recite from every day. Sadan Chudam. Oh yeah. May I consider sentient beings as precious as my life? May I consider them even more precious to me than myself? May all of their sufferings ripen upon me, and all of my happiness ripen upon them. So especially those last two lines in this verse by Nagarjuna. So he says, may I consider sentient beings as precious, as dear to me as my life? Dani Semjin. May I consider them even more dear than myself. So in the short, the sentiment is, may I consider like the welfare of other sentient beings even more important than my own, and treasure and cherish sentient beings even more than I cherish myself. And then may all of their sufferings ripen upon me, and all of my own happiness ripen upon, or all of my own virtue ripen upon them. So those last two lines express the meditation on Tonglen, where we, as a method to generate bodhicitta, we imagine basically what we we recognize that the source of all of our own problems is our egotistical, selfish, and self-centered concern, being concerned exclusively with what I want and what I like and my own happiness at the expense of caring about others. So we recognize this egotistical, selfish concern as a source of our problems, and visualize that as like a black ball at our heart, and then think, you know, the opposite. May I generate the opposite of that altruistic concern for others? May I have more concern to, you know, accomplish the welfare of others, to reduce the suffering of others, and accomplish the well-being of others than I am concerned with myself, right? So recognizing this, you know, individual selfish concern as the source of all my problems. And so actually to benefit ourselves, but in a wholesome way, then we recognize the source of our problems is this, you know, the small-minded, childish kind of selfish concern. And then in order to destroy that, generate concern for others. As an expression of that concern for others, we imagine or we think, may the suffering of others ripen upon me so that they're free from it. And in ripening upon us, we actually put the suffering of others upon our own. We throw it at our selfish concern and thereby destroy it, right? And then thereby others are free from suffering, and we also become free from suffering because we destroy the very cause of our own suffering. So we imagine in that way. So that's what he means when he's saying, may the suffering of others ripen upon me. And then may my own happiness and virtue ripen upon others. So then we imagine all of our possessions, our body, and even our roots of virtue, our merits we've accumulated. May it ripen upon others and transform into whatever is beneficial for them, right? So this is a early kind of source of the mind training teachings. This verse by Nagarjuna from the Precious Garland, right? But he doesn't elaborate much. Then where you find the sentiments of the mind training teachings elaborated more, very much more, is in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, right? Which many of you might know, but it's a classic text, you know, by this ancient Indian Buddhist master, Shantideva. His most popular text, The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, which is translated into English. There's several different translations, and is probably the text most taught by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So there he expresses many aspects of this mind training, that we're going to look at. But then, you know, so this lineage of this teachings comes from Shakyamuni Buddha through Nagarjuna, down to Shantideva, and then down to Lama Atisha, one of the last great masters of ancient India, Buddhist masters of ancient India, who actually came to Tibet. So it's Lama Atisha brought it to Tibet, and then he taught it in secret to his immediate disciples because it was considered by Lama Atisha and then several generations of his disciples, up to Geshe Chakawa, who's the author of this text, that this kind of way of thinking and way of practicing is not suitable for most people, right? Because it's quite, you know, for most people, it's quite scary to think of, may the suffering of others ripen upon me. It sounds very heavy, right? And may I give away all my happiness to others. It kind of sounds like you're going to end up like miserable and bereft of any happiness, right? Which is not the case, but it can sound like that. So anyway, for whatever reason, this teaching was kept secret for, you know, a long time. And then it was Geshe Chakawa, he's the author of this 7-point mind training. Actually, it says by Pabongka Rinpoche here, because Pabongka Rinpoche basically took Chakawa's version and just rearranged it a little bit, and then published in that way. It rearranged it according to some instructions by Lama Tsongkhapa. But the text is actually by Geshe Chakawa. So that's what he speaks about a bit here, and I won't read it because it's just not necessary. So the idea is I'll lead you through this text. So you have a good basis. When you want to meditate, you can just go back and read some of the words of this and try to remember whatever explanation you remember. And then also bring, you know, from the other readings you do, use that as a basis for meditation now and in the future. And also because it covers all the main points, and you get a taste of like the traditional presentation of the mind training. Some of the significant features of this kind of mind training teaching or this transforming problems method Or, I mean, the main thinking is that ordinarily, well, when we do Buddhist practice, there's three levels of motivation, right? When we do three typical levels of motivation for anyone who's, practicing Buddhism seriously. Um, the most basic level of motivation is basically anyone who's practicing Buddhism, that's not just doing it as because they're born into a Buddhist family and that's what everybody does, but with a sincere reason, like for doing it, right? Is that you have problems in your life, you have suffering, right? You have, painful experiences of body and mind. If we didn't have those, why do we need to, practice Buddhism? We can just, eat, drink, and be merry. Like we don't need spiritual teachings. And every spiritual, tradition is kind of like that. So, but the most basic level, then we want to overcome problems of not only of this life, um, not only of this life, but also in a way overcome problems in a way that they don't occur again and again, right? At least in not only this life, but also next life. So a basic level of Buddhist practice, one's motivation is to practicing in order to overcome problems and create the causes of happiness, and a cause of happiness that lasts not only in this life, but recognizing that we're all going to die eventually. And we also want to have happiness in next life so that after we die, it's not like we just have to start from ground zero and start all over again, right? Whatever progress we make in becoming a happier person, a more whole, a more satisfied, wiser, more compassionate person, we want that to last into next life and be able to kind of continually build on whatever progress we've made this life, build on it next life. So most basic level of practice is seeking some form of well-being that also not only we have this life, but also continues to next life. A higher level of practice is where we recognize, as long as I take rebirth through the force of karma and afflictive emotions in samsara again, as long as I uncontrollably take rebirth, like each death being a leaf that dries and has fallen from a tree, and then where it's going to land, it has no control. It's just blown by the wind and drawn by gravity and whatever other forces. And it has no control where it lands. So like that, as long as when we die, we're just thrown by the force of our own karma into some kind of rebirth as a human, as an animal, as a god, as a hell being, wherever. As long as we have no control and we're under the control of karma, then we'll inevitably experience problems again and again and again in samsara. That's what samsara is, right? So then the second level of motivation is the wish to be free from that whole process. Here, I can stop sharing my screen now. Is to be free from that whole process of rebirth, old age, sickness, and death, and then rebirth again and again and again, right? For oneself. So that's the second level of practice. But here, for the mind training, and here the highest level of motivation and the level of motivation that's the most relevant for this module, right? And for these teachings on transforming problems into the path and for mind training is the bodhicitta motivation. The motivation recognizing that even if I could free myself from samsara, there's countless other people I care about. Like just in this life, my mother, my father, my brothers and sisters, my children, my friends, and just other strangers who are like me, who I care about, right? So there's countless other people I care about that even if I'm free from samsara myself, like what real satisfaction is there in that when all the other people I care about are still suffering in samsara? So the highest level of motivation is to not our main concern not being to be free from samsara ourselves, but to do whatever we can to lead all sentient beings, all those we care about, and to actually generate infinite caring about every sentient being, every animal, every human being, no matter from if they're man or woman, what country they're from, what race they are, what kind of animal they are, or what kind of rebirth they have, even if they're a ghost or a hell being or some kind of worldly god. No matter what kind of being they are, if they're the same as me in that they fundamentally want happiness and they fundamentally want to be free from suffering, then just as I wish that they'd care about me, I should also care about them equally, right? So with that kind of vast motivation, caring about all sentient beings, then we generate the aspiration, may I do whatever is best for all of them. May I become whatever is most beneficial to all of them. And we aspire to achieve that. So in Buddhism, that state that is the elimination of all faults and the perfection of all positive qualities, right? The state from within which, including omniscience, we bring to perfection our ability to know whatever is possible to be known, right? There's omniscience. So that state is called enlightenment or Buddhahood, right? So this, and then this attitude, aspiring to achieve full enlightenment in order to work for the welfare of other sentient beings in the best possible way, is called bodhicitta. Or bodhi means enlightenment, and citta means mind. So it's a mind aspiring to achieve enlightenment out of, for an altruistic reason, in order to work for the welfare of others. So that's the motivation behind like this genre of teachings, right? The mind training teachings. Yeah. And so, yeah, and so the main technique that this teaching focuses on is that, of course, in order to achieve full enlightenment, it's not something for most people that they can achieve in one lifetime. Eventually, in one lifetime, we will achieve it because every sentient being, we all have the potential to achieve full enlightenment. So eventually, each of us will achieve it in one lifetime. But it takes many, many lifetimes working towards that to achieve it, right? So, and for most of us, who are beginner practitioners, like it's easy to practice Dharma when, we're in a quiet place with friendly people and we have had a good meal and we're well rested and we don't have to worry about, our where we're going to stay, our rent or our mortgage, or, we have enough money, we have enough food, we're in a safe environment. Then it's easy to practice Dharma. But as soon as we get sick, we have a headache, we're hungry, we're tired, there's somebody who's really doing something to annoy us, or threatening us, we feel threatened, then it's difficult to practice Dharma, right? Then our whole Dharma practice goes out the window, right? And we just resort to sort of, our base instincts, right? And react. So, and then so if we're continually like that, then we can practice Dharma when everything's going well, but when things are not going well, we can't, and we fall back from our practice. Then it's difficult to practice. It's like you take 2 steps ahead and 1 step back, and 2 steps and like that, right? And so it's very, and especially because, I mean, as the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha predicted 2,500 years ago, like a Buddha appears in a world system when beings are ripe to learn about Buddhism, right? In the Buddhist view, there's no beginning to history. Like world systems come into being and then they go out of existence. So, for example, think about the Big Bang. Like now according to physics, then our whole universe has arisen from a singularity. What is about 13 to 14 billion years ago, and the whole universe is expanding from then with billions of galaxies and so forth. But eventually, well, it's not sure. Either it'll continue to expand and just dissipate, or eventually, or the gravitational force of the galaxies will be such that eventually they pull each other together and they reverse back to another big, what's it called? There's a name for it. Not the Big Bang, but the opposite of a bang, like a big, I don't know, conglomeration or something. I forget. There's a term for it, I'm quite sure. But anyway, in the Buddhist view, though, the Big Bang wasn't the beginning of the universe. There had to have been the Big Bounce. Sir Penrose, I think what's his name? I think it's Robert Penrose. Anyway, he's a British physicist, very, very famous British physicist. I believe he's a Nobel Prize winner. He also postulates that before the Big Bang, because something cannot arise from nothing, right? That doesn't happen. So there had to have been something before the Bang. Anyway, in Buddhism, there's no beginning to world systems, and we're not the only world system. There's multiple other, numberless other world systems. So why am I talking about this? Because a Buddha appears in a world system at a time when beings are ripe to hear the Buddhist teachings, right? To receive and to practice Buddhist teachings. So, before 2,500 years ago, Shakyamuni Buddha hadn't arisen in the world, and Buddhism didn't exist at this time and place. So then he came and taught the Dharma, and then people started practicing. And you read sutras and see during the Buddha's lifetime, just when the Buddha would teach, one time, many people on hearing his teaching the first time, they would immediately generate profound realizations because their minds are so ripe through having practiced in previous lives, right? Um, but the Buddha predicted that after 5,000 years, his teachings would die out in the world because conditions in the world would become more and more difficult for practice, right? Because afflictive emotions become stronger, and there'd be more strife and more selfishness, more greed, more anger, and more kind of materialism, consumer mentality, and people would be less and less interested in spiritual practice. And you kind of see that now. You look at any of the major spiritual traditions, there's not many of them that are really growing. They're mostly shrinking, especially like here in the US, you look at Christianity, probably universally, definitely in the Catholic Church. I grew up as Catholic. No, church attendance is as like all-time low. Maybe the evangelical churches, maybe more, but I'm not sure. It definitely seems like, you think 100 years ago, like everybody was religious. You go to any town, like how many churches, even a small town, and the churches are all at the middle of the town. Like that was the center. I visited, or you visit towns in Italy, I visited Florence a couple of years ago. I mean, the cathedral is just like amazing. People it's like, and think of the resources people had then. It's the sum of money and sum of wealth people have is way less then. And yet they could build this, all the best artisans, the best minds, the best architects, and the most wealthy families. They pour all of this energy into creating these amazing works, like a cathedral, buildings and artworks in honor of, God and Jesus and their Virgin Mary and their religious beliefs. Now, like, you don't see that now. Now, like, as one of my Buddhist friends said, now, like, what are the major, apart from, business buildings like skyscrapers and things, what are the biggest, the buildings we create? It's sports arenas, like for the Olympics or something. It's not religious buildings. No, we don't, that's not a thing now. So that's also an indication of like how spiritual practice is no longer like a central focus of most communities, right? And probably in the Buddhist view, that's kind of an indication of a decline, right? In culture, in a way, or definitely in spiritual practice. Although, there's other sides to that story. It's not only that, because you see, Buddhism is actually, like in the West now, it's spreading. It's a religion that's spreading. Also, Islam is spreading. Hinduism probably also spreading in the West in the way it hasn't before. Anyway, it's a big question. But why am I talking about all this? Because I know I'm going off on tangents all over the place, but this is what I do at the beginning of a course. Is that, and we should meditate a bit. So we will do that because we're about out of time. Is that the whole point of this transforming problems into the path, mind training teachings, is that, if we're going to, right, the main motivation is to, in order to be of the most, as a one person, to use our life and this life and future lives in a way that's the most beneficial to all sentient beings, then and to use that to strive towards enlightenment. But if we don't know how to transform problems into the path, if every obstacle we face, it undermines our practice, weakens our practice, sets us back in our practice, then we're not really going to get anywhere quickly, right? So, and then also, this is where I was coming with the whole like universe is tangent, and the decline of Buddhism in the world tangent is because it's becoming more and more difficult to practice Dharma in the world, right? Because there's more problems, there's more afflictive emotions, more kind of materialistic mentality, more competition between people. Yeah. So basically, conditions become, and less, it's less of a universally valued thing to practice a spiritual path in the world. I think that you can say. And so it's more difficult to practice spiritual path. It's more and more like you're the one person swimming against the stream, right? But but then also the whole point of this mind training teachings is to learn to take all the different obstacles we encounter as part of the path, so that instead of it becoming feeling like it's something that's going against our practice, it's like, and here I like to use the analogy of a sailboat. It's like, if you're a sailboat going directly into the wind, then yeah, you're not making progress. Say you might use oars or a motor and you can go into the wind, but if you just turn slightly at an angle, then you can use the force of the wind to propel you actually forward, actually into the wind, in the direction of the wind, because of the shape of the sail, the aerodynamic shape of the sail, and the way the rudder works and things. So the essence of this mind training genre of teachings is basically to learn to look at problems in a way that they become fuel for and they propel us in a spiritual development. And so, yeah, that's the main theme. Um, yeah. Why don't we look at just the first verse and then we'll meditate a bit because it says that. So it says, so this is, yeah, the very first verse says, homage to great compassion. And yeah, why is it pay homage? Often at the beginning of a text, they'll make homage to Shakyamuni Buddha or make homage to Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom. Like most texts that are about emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, they pay homage to Manjushri. Texts that are about Vinaya and the Buddhist ethics, they usually pay homage to Shakyamuni Buddha. But here, because mind training teachings are based on this attitude of bodhicitta, and the essence of bodhicitta is having compassion for sentient beings, seeing the suffering not only of oneself, but seeing the suffering of others and having empathy, feeling, a degree of the suffering of others, and then wishing the mind of compassion, wishing that to do something to free others from suffering, wishing that others be free from suffering, because that's the essential attitude. That's the basis for this practice. Then he pays homage to great compassion at the beginning. And great compassion is different from compassion, right? Compassion is just you see your own suffering and wish to be free from it. It's compassion for yourself. You see the suffering of one other person or two other people and wish they could be free from it. It's just ordinary compassion, right? Compassion is the mind viewing suffering and wishing that someone could be free from it. Great compassion is something much more than that. Great compassion is observing not only one sentient being, but imagining all sentient beings. It's an attitude that's extended towards not just one or two or three or one group of sentient beings. It's extended universally, without limit, towards all sentient beings. And not only it's a mind, extending this attitude of, recognizing beings have suffering and wishing they could be free from it. That's extended towards all sentient beings without discrimination and without excluding any. But also it's a mind of taking personal responsibility, that not only may they be free from suffering, but may I myself do whatever I can to free beings from suffering. So it's a very profound attitude. It's great compassion. So it says, homage to great compassion. The essence of this nectar of secret instruction is transmitted from the master from Sumatra. So this is the master from Sumatra is Serlingpa. Is an ancient Indian Buddhist master who is one of Atisha's main teacher of bodhicitta. So it's said that this instruction comes from Master Serlingpa. Okay. Are there any questions about any of that? We'll stop there for explanation today.
I have a comment.
Please.
Just thank you for what you shared about the decline of religion, because it caused me to think, because I've been a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
You said this thing, it's become difficult to practice due to, there was a word you used, but basically the issues that are in the world. And the only way to practice, to be able to practice, is to be in a place where it's common in society. And so I'm always trying to understand my why. Why did I feel pulled and called to be here in Thailand right now? And it was very, very strong. And 90% of society here is Buddhist. So it's in the society, Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism. And I just, yeah, I wanted to say that. So it's becoming even more clear for me, my purpose for being here. Um, Yeah, so that's all. I just want to say thank you for that. That was really eye-opening for me. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Although, yeah, definitely I mean, the newer we are in any practice, the more helpful and the more necessary it is to be surrounded by others who are
Right.
like-minded and support us in that practice. But the
Yeah.
goal, and I think that's probably true in any spiritual tradition, I mean, a goal in the long run is that like we become stable enough and mature enough and strong enough in practice that we can practice in any environment, that
Mhm.
others don't affect us, right?
Not if you have monkey mind.
Right. If you have monkey mind, you're a beginner. So you need to be surrounded, you need supportive conditions.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
gradually, what we're working towards is to be able to have a mind that's stable enough and strong
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
devoted enough to our own and clear enough about our own path that we can
Yeah.
practice in any environment.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Mhm,
That's where I'm at. And so like this thing about this about and so I've been preaching for years about alleviating the suffering of others. It's
mhm,
just been there. And but there's still this thing of this monkey mind, this worry mind constantly that is kind of like cuts off that goal, that path. Because I'm
mhm,
always worrying about what's going on. But there's still this place deep in me that wants to alleviate not only my suffering, but the suffering of others. And so, yeah,
yeah,
this is very profound. Thank you.
yeah,
Be quiet.
yes, Madhu.
Keshla, thank you. One thing I've struggled with is I have a daughter. I have two daughters. Um, they're 20 and 18. One of whom is open to learning about spirituality and spiritualism. It doesn't matter which religion, but they're open to it.
Mm,
But the other one, um, she says, "Mom, I've not been in that much of a problem to actually want to learn about it." And so I'm thinking, why should you have to wait for a problem to come to you or perceive a problem
mm,
in order to get into the spiritual path? And I worry that without having the support of a spiritual path, it's she's not going to have that grounding, and it is going to be so challenging for her to find. And then I sometimes just get let go, saying, if she's right, if the timing is right, and if it's right for her, she'll find it, however, whichever way, and that's how I comfort myself. But that
mm.
worry is always there. So how do you inspire youngsters of today?
Basically, you just be a good role model, no? You just practice yourself and don't push anything on them.
Mm,
I think you really have to not push anything on other people. The Buddha very much set that example very clearly,
mm-hmm,
in his own life. You see the Buddha he never asked people to come listen to him.
mm-hmm,
He never went to some place and just taught to people um, basically when he was not asked about
mm,
something.
mm,
He would just practice and remain, silent. And then
mm,
when people would ask, then he would teach. And that that principle is very strong in Buddhism. That you don't teach unless requested.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, in a sincere way, right?
mm,
So I think, yeah, I mean, I think that needs to be part of our practice too. Although it's a very difficult part of practice because, like you say, when there's someone you really care about,
yes.
you see that what I'm learning and the way I'm benefiting from, like Buddhism, in this case, could really benefit them.
Yeah.
But then they're not interested.
Yep.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
There's just
You
no way
see
around
them
it.
suffering, and you see them with the monkey mind, and you're like,
Yeah.
how can I help you? I have so many techniques that I'm learning. I wish I can help
I
you.
mean, the best way is to just try to practice yourself and be a good example. And then, yeah, sometimes when, occasions arise
Yeah.
and it's not in a preachy way, but you can mention things
Mm,
like, oh, there's this and this and this. And then if they're interested, they'll follow that. If they're
right.
not interested, then they leave it and you have to just leave it. And
Mm,
yeah, I mean, it's also up to people's karma.
Yes.
It's not that everybody who becomes interested in Buddhism or a spiritual path that they have some suffering and that leads them to that. For many, it's like that. But for some people, they have a curiosity. They have some kind of connection from past lives and they're just interested, right? Without a big problem coming. But or they see someone and they feel inspired, or they read a book, or they hear from a friend and then they're just interested.
Right.
But for many people, the real powerful interest comes from hardship, no?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, indeed.
yeah,
Thank you, Geshe.
yeah. Okay, let's just meditate a little bit at the end here. Yeah. So get comfortable in your posture. Take a few deep breaths and clear your mind. Mm. So then, as I was saying, the essence of this mind training practice or this method of transforming problems is just looking at problems in a way such that it furthers our and helps us develop our own spiritual practice. So I would invite you, just for a couple minutes that we have, just try to find examples in your own life experience of problems you encountered, difficulties that you faced, from which you grew, right? That by having to go through, the hardship of, could be sickness, relationship problem, struggle with drug or alcohol addiction, or with a difficult friend, or betrayal, or something like that. But look at some difficulty you've encountered in life, and that by having to go through dealing with that, that on the other side, in retrospect, you can see how that actually benefited you in the long run, how you grew as a result and matured as a person, or maybe became a better person as a result of that. So try to find an example like that in your own life. Mhm. Okay, so relax your attention. So I wonder, could you, I'm gonna ask for a raise of hands. How many of you could find an example of some difficulty that you faced that you grew from? All of you, I think, no? Yeah, all of you. So actually, all of you know the essence of what we're going to be learning about. If you see an example like that, you already actually know the essence of this practice, right? And then what we'll learn about in the next 3 sessions is just to kind of help elaborate on that, right? On that basic practice, no? But I mean, the essential practice is really by looking at how we've grown through past hardships and then remembering that so that in the future, as we face more hardships, right from the beginning, we can see that in a way that this is good, this is beneficial for me, right? You know, that we don't have to wait for that after it's all over. In retrospect, we feel it was helpful. Right from the beginning, in the midst of a hardship, we recognize this is good for me, right? And then right in the midst of it, we can experience that hardship joyfully. That's kind of what we're aiming for, and that's kind of the essence of the practice. Okay. So let's dedicate. Yeah. So think of whatever merit we've created, and we can rejoice, having started out the session with the positive motivation. So by the force of this merit, you know, recognizing that there's so many sentient beings in the world who don't have access to spiritual teachings like this, who don't have comfortable, supportive environments like we do to meditate or contemplate or learn things, who are in the midst of, you know, war, like people in Ukraine, in Gaza, in a famine, in Gaza, in the conflict in other places in the Middle East, and then different regions of the world, in Africa, South America, even those in abusive, you know, relationships, you know, here in the United States, other places in the world. And then those who are sick, those who are lonely, those who are depressed, those who suffer from severe mental illness or drug and alcohol addiction. So many beings, human beings, not to mention all the animals, no? And the other kinds of beings that suffer in so many ways. So whatever positive energy we've created here, may it all become a cause to reduce and lead towards the elimination of suffering and the causes of suffering of all sentient beings. And may it become a cause for the well-being and happiness and flourishing of ourselves and all sentient beings. And then by this merit also may Buddhism and all spiritual traditions that are beneficial to beings, may they flourish in the world now and far into the future. And then especially the peerless teachers of those traditions. So in Buddhism, the Tibetan Buddhism as well as the Dalai Lama and other teachers, may they have their lives be long and stable. And especially may all His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Buddhas and all the Bodhisattvas' prayers for beings in the world be immediately accomplished. And then finally, may the attitude of the mind of bodhicitta and great compassion in ourselves and in the mind streams of others, the continuum of others, may it increase more and more and never decline. And then bring to mind any other prayers or aspirations that you'd like to make. So may all those prayers also be accomplished in accordance with your wishes. Okay, so we end there today. Just to remind you, Venerable Roger Kunzang, who was Lama Zopa Rinpoche's main attendant for more than 40 years, many years, and also the CEO of FPMT organization for the last, 20 years or so. He'll be speaking here at Ocean of Compassion tomorrow night from 7 to 8:30. And so you can come in person or join online. He'll be speaking about the life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And then, I don't know, should I announce anything else, Bae? Okay. Anyway, we have a lot of other programs. You can find that about on the website. Okay. Thank you all. Have a good week and see you next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Babe.